Welcome to Two Therapists Talking. The hope for this podcast is to talk about important issues related to couples and individuals who are struggling in their lives with many different issues. I'm David Thompson, a marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Sherie Christensen, marriage and family therapist. Please join us as we explore these issues together, and we hope you will learn and be enlightened along the way. Come find us at twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast. Hello, welcome back to Two Therapists Talking. I'm Sherie.
And I'm David.
And we are doing a little series right now on intrusive thoughts.
Intrusive, unwanted thoughts, or overcoming them.
Yes, yes. We're going to teach you how to have more intrusive
You might know what they
thoughts
are
in your
already.
life.
What do we do about them, right?
Yes. So if you didn't catch our first episode on this, go back one and go ahead and listen to that. And it gives us a really good introduction about unwanted, intrusive thoughts and of what they are, how they're showing up, and some of the key important takeaways, which is to make sure that we're accepting, having awareness of them, and not engaging with those thoughts. So
yeah,
really
I
good
think
information there.
Probably the biggest takeaway for me from that first session is stop fighting and stop avoiding.
Yes.
It seems so counterintuitive, I know, but to overcome something, you
have
let
to
it
starve it.
alone.
Yes.
Right. And so, go back and listen if you haven't the first one, and we'll talk more about that. But
Yeah. So we want to now start talking about, what kinds of intrusive thoughts do we have, and how can understanding those be beneficial for us? And then we'll get into how to start challenging them.
Yep.
And how do we starve them? So our intrusive thoughts typically have three categories. And again, some of this information comes from a fantastic book on this subject, under Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts by Sally Winston and Martin Self. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that book, that would be a great thing to do. If this feels like you want more information about this, and it feels like something that would be applicable to you. So as we're looking at intrusive thoughts, they categorize them into three categories. The first one is morally repugnant thoughts. So this is definitely like things that are going against your moral value system. And that could be anything from fears of causing harm to sexual taboos.
Right.
All of those different kinds of things. What would happen if I stepped off this ledge?
Snap this kitten's neck.
Yeah. Just
what kind of a person has that thought?
Yes.
And then
right. We're going to learn about that. We're not going to say that anymore. Right.
Yeah.
But that will lead us to, oftentimes we take ownership for that thought. And the meaning that we make of that is it leads us to question our values, our morals.
Right. We're hard on ourselves, and we beat ourselves up. What
why
kind of a
would I do
person?
that?
What kind of a? And I know that this is hurting someone.
Yeah.
Or hurting myself, and I do it anyway. Why do I do it anyway if I know it's hurting?
Yeah.
And then we really get hard on ourselves.
Or I could hurt somebody if, why would I even think that I would hurt somebody? Or that poor little animal. We just start attaching all of this meaning about who we are, that we would be having those thoughts. It must mean that I don't have very good values, or my morals aren't what they think they are, or I don't have the self-control, or I'm not as good of a person. The
second category is nonsensical thoughts. These are thoughts that, like it sounds, just don't make a lot of sense. We may doubt close relationships that haven't given us any reason to doubt them.
Right.
Or picture absurdly embarrassing scenarios, which leads us to question our sanity again. Thoughts that just seem out of left field. And we go, why would I have that thought? Again, sort of what kind of a person has that thought? But instead of a value moral foundation, it's more of that's just am I okay? Am I doing okay to even have that thought? It doesn't make sense.
Right. It doesn't make sense if you were to look at the facts, for example, when you're thinking about doubting closer. I just, they didn't mean that. They don't actually love me. They don't, things like that. Right. It's okay, well, whoa, wait a minute. What are the facts?
Yeah.
have they been showing up this way? Are they, okay. Well, and it's that nonsensical in that it doesn't make sense within that context. The third category of intrusive thoughts are thoughts that aren't entirely unwanted.
These are trickier.
Yes. This one is like, okay, how are we going to... So this could be things like revenge fantasies or being stuck in a grief cycle. So they can provide some relief, but they can turn very problematic when you judge them too harshly.
Right. Which is really where all of these turn problematic when you judge them too harshly.
Yes.
Remember that they're thoughts.
Yes.
And they're like invitations for you to RSVP, but you don't have to.
Yes.
Which is such a strange concept because you think, well, it's in my head. It's my
in
thought.
my head.
Remember, not all the thoughts in your head come from you.
Yes.
So go a little easier on yourself.
Yeah. And again, this one is a little bit harder because maybe you aren't very happy with that person. And what if, you did this, or you could do this, or something could happen to them, or maybe you are grieving something, but then you dwell on it and dump in and like you just keep going and going and it starts cycling and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So that one becomes trickier. A third one that David has in this category is also toxic worry.
Toxic worry.
Mm-hmm. So there's an amount of worry that can be productive, right?
In fact, without some worry or anxiety, there are problems we would never solve.
Yes.
So
there's some worry that is like, okay, that's helpful because we start thinking about it, we're mulling it over, we come up with solutions, right? Toxic worry is when we're fixating on worst case scenarios, when we're fixating on what ifs, when we're just kind of starting to spiral with fear and doubt.
Yes.
And so it's really important to get clarity on what is an appropriate or a good amount of worry that's productive to you. And then at what point do you start crossing over into this toxic worry? Right.
So I think the most important lesson, no matter what category this falls into, again, is that avoidance doesn't work. And I imagine there's a lot of people listening to this that's really kind of a big relief because you've been trying to avoid and you can't pull it off.
Avoid,
sometimes
trying to
you
ignore,
can, but most
trying
of the
to push
time
away.
you can't.
Yeah. Yes.
It doesn't work. And these unwanted thoughts are normal. They ebb and flow with life.
Yes.
They cannot be avoided. So again, we learn to coexist with them without judgment, and we can break the cycle.
Yes.
It'll be hard. I'm telling you, it will take repeated effort and commitment. It won't come easily, even if it's like, oh, I really like this concept. Wouldn't that be something? You still got to work, and you're still going to have to hold yourself accountable and all the things that we talk about. But you can, which hopefully is very...
Yes. Because it's an effective type of work. Like it's going to take a lot of work, but it's work that's going to be effective.
Right.
As opposed to the worry where the brain's like, or that, if you're thinking about that part's work, right? That worry part of the brain's like, this is going to help. This is going to help. But it's just spiraling you instead of when you understand this work to just let it go, to coexist, let them pass, not attach to them, not make meaning out of it.
Right.
It is definitely going to take work because it's a new pattern for your brain, right?
Right.
But it is going to be an effective work. It will actually eventually produce positive results, the results that you want.
Right.
And that part of your brain thinks that it's going to help by doing, but it won't. The worrier part of the brain, it won't help if it keeps doing that job.
Yep.
We're going to work and have that part of that brain start helping the self by just saying, okay, yep, there it is. And we're going to do this job instead. Just let it kind of pass through like, oh, that was an interesting, intrusive thought, and let it head right back out the other side without holding on to it.
And we can. There's hope. While we're talking about this, let's unpack a few of the myths that we believe about our thoughts so that we can start to challenge them. And let's discuss some of these myths. So Everybody has these again. These should all be familiar. Myth number 1, we can fully control our thoughts.
Right?
I hope I don't
Why
need
do
to
we
tell
all
you why
believe
that's a
this?
myth.
It's true, but it's just a very consistently pervasive thought that a lot of people have. Belief, right?
Yeah, right? And how many times do we do something where we go, that's kind of weird that I just said that or just did that?
Yeah.
I mean, again, if you think about the number of thoughts we have in a day, how in the world would we fully control 100,000 thoughts in a day?
Yes. It's just not going to
I
happen.
can't even be aware of
I don't even
1/10
know.
of those. Right.
Right? So if you don't even know half of those thoughts are there, whatever is flowing through your mind, how can you possibly have full, utter control? Right? So they're just going to happen on their own, right? It's like hiccups.
They are mental hiccups, right? So we can fully control our thoughts. False. In reality, we cannot fully control our thoughts. They arise on their own, like Sherie said, mental hiccups. And that's okay.
Yes.
Myth number 1.
Yes. Well, the myth isn't that it's okay.
Yeah, the myth isn't that it's okay. It's okay that we have them, yes.
All right, myth number 2. Our thoughts reveal our true character and our true self.
Yeah.
And David mentioned this previously, right? In reality, it is your actions that reveal and shape more of your character than your thoughts. And again, this is all related to like attaching to and making meaning of these things. So if it's a random flit and whatever, and things are just passing through, right? You still have choice. You still have action, right?
Right.
Thoughts coming into your mind are not, you haven't chosen anything yet. Like you haven't acted yet. A thought showing up in your mind is not an action. It's not something that you've chosen. What you do with that after, right? Just moving on or acting on it in a physical sense, which would be then again your actions that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. That's where your true character is revealed.
Right. So some thoughts can reveal our true character and other thoughts just don't.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Third myth. Our unconscious mind will force us to act on our thoughts. False. In reality, disturbing thoughts don't mean there's anything wrong with you. They're just a normal part of being human. And your unconscious mind can't force you to act on them. Think about how many times you've had thoughts that you didn't act on.
Yep.
A lot.
Lots.
Of course, there's times where we do, but there's more times that we don't.
Yeah, probably.
Because we just have too many thoughts.
There's just too many thoughts.
So there doesn't have to be a deeper meaning or hidden desire.
Again,
this is a big one.
Yes. Again, the meaning that we make. Oh, that must mean that I really believe this or I really want this.
I'm not really making progress because...
Yes.
Oh, slow down.
Wait a minute. Yeah. Yep. Okay. The last myth is that thinking about something makes it more likely to happen.
I know what you're thinking.
Didn't we just talk about how we're giving it power by thinking about
Like, thinking about something is going to make it more likely to happen, right? Well, that's the myth. Why?
Because your thoughts don't control the universe, right? Shoot. And thinking about a scenario doesn't make it real. Right? So I think it's helpful to kind of separate that out and recognize, yes, like if we're giving prolonged time and attention, we've taken a random thought that's passed through our mind and we've like attached to it. And we start going through it and creating what we think that should look like and then planning out how that's going to happen. Yes, we go through that process. It's probably going to be a little bit more likely to happen.
Right. Concentrated thoughts over time help shape our behavior. But that's within your control. So
yes,
I
that's
think a
the
good
part
example,
you do get to control.
Yeah, I think a good example is this concept of safety, and we may feel unsafe, and the more we think about it, the more unsafe we feel. But initially, safety is tricky because we'll feel there's danger when there may not be danger.
Right.
In fact, it may just be we're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so just having that thought doesn't necessarily mean it's reality. But we talk about this a lot. This is why my mantra, and you've heard me say this, I'd like to have AI look up how many times I've said this on this podcast. But mental health is a commitment to reality at all costs. And feelings are valid, but not necessarily reality.
Yes.
And we're more concerned about what's real than what we think or feel.
Yep.
We're more concerned about what's real than what we think or feel.
I love that. Yes. So thinking about something does not make it more likely to happen.
Yep. So you're getting the point, right? These intrusive thoughts, they're universal, they're normal. The difference is how we react to them. Instead of making them more, they're significant, they're important, we need to pay attention. The author recommends that we view them as earwigs, which is like, wait, what? But
yes.
It kind of fits, actually. They suggest we see them as annoying but irrelevant, which is exactly what an earwig is, right?
Yep.
Like nobody likes earwigs. You see them and you're like, that's a
weird,
funky looking.
Yes.
But how much do we worry about earwigs?
Yeah.
We don't. They're completely irrelevant. Mm-hmm. So I like the analogy. Remember, if we resist, that makes them stick, these thoughts. So normalizing them helps to loosen the grip.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's just there, but it's irrelevant.
Yep.
Should we try to avoid triggers then? Should we try to, like, push it away, try to avoid triggers?
Generally speaking, no. There are some exceptions, of course, to that rule. But generally speaking, trying to avoid triggers, going out of our way to avoid triggers, only makes them more noticeable to your brain. Remember, you tell your brain, pay attention to this thing when we make it a big thing.
Yeah.
And so we don't
whether
want
it's
to
a good thing or a bad thing that you're making it a thing.
Yep. And we don't want to reinforce the idea that certain ideas or places or things or thoughts are literally dangerous if they're not. Now, there's exceptions to this, right? Because some places are literally dangerous.
Right.
But most aren't. Mm-hmm. And so we want to be able to face these triggers, realizing that they have no power over you. Again, they're more like a suggestion. You could get really worked up about this. You could feel a lot of fear about this. Mm-hmm. Or not. The choice is yours. When we think of them as invitations, it can help.
Yes. I like that. Invitations. I think that is a really good point that I think will help a lot of people. I think that has really helped me, is remembering that when we think about these different things as literally dangerous, right?
Right.
That makes sense in my brain that, like, oh yeah, if my brain thought it was really dangerous, something there was something really dangerous, something really that was going to be a big problem, then of course my brain is going to pay way more attention to that. Yep. The brain wants to make sure you're safe and you're okay.
Right.
So I think that's a really helpful one if you're struggling with, wait a minute. How do we starve this? Or why if we just pay attention to it, or just trying to avoid something, like avoiding doesn't seem like it's a problem. Avoiding seems like it would be a good thing. But when you are trying to avoid something, right? The process is don't do that thing, don't think that thing, don't whatever that thing, it's bad, it's dangerous, it's not good for you, right? And so then the brain's like, oh, something's dangerous, bad, not good for me. I better make sure I pay really close attention to that so that I don't drink the poison, right?
Exactly. Remember, your thoughts don't control your actions. Think of it like a radio with hundreds of stations playing at once. You decide which one to listen to. Intrusive thoughts are just static, not instructions. And the book talked about this, and I like the idea, static versus instructions. Let go of the need to analyze and judge and resist them, and you can see them as simply mental noise in the background, which would be really ideal, right? But we can get there with, again, repeated effort, practice, and being committed to it, because initially it won't come easy.
Yes. And it's not the radio station where you're like, quick, hurry, change the channel. This is bad. It's just like irrelevant. It's like, oh, static. I'm not getting what I wanted to listen to.
Right.
Or, oh, this is a country station or, whatever it is.
Right.
You just want to change it, move through like, oh, not important. Right. Just like the earwig.
Yep.
So just like I was mentioning just a few minutes ago, like our amygdala, that part of our brain that needs to keep us safe, will sometimes misfire. And they'll treat those harmless thoughts like threats, right? And so it's that concept of there's that fear pathway in the brain. We're overreacting to something, so the brain's like, oh no, this is like a problem.
Right.
And the amygdala is like, okay, we got you. We'll take care of this.
We
will pay extra attention to this whenever it comes up. We will make sure that we make it a really big deal. We will search it out when we're in various environments. So that we can make sure, and we'll let you know, and we'll have these, things come into your mind more and more often so that you're aware and you can keep yourself safe, right?
Yep.
So it makes sense when you're thinking about it in those contexts that, oh, okay, we're telling our brain to spend tons and tons of time, and then that will make your brain do it more.
Right.
And so in order to reverse that, we have to, and build that more resilient, more calm pathways in your brain. You have to not react to those thoughts, right? And to that amygdala reaction of danger when there's not danger. Like, oh, that's silly. Something just very, again, acknowledging it and seeing it as irrelevant and moving on. Oh, that's silly. That's a funny thing to think right now.
Right. That wise mind.
Not actual danger.
Yep. That wise mind part that just observes without judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want that calm, rational self that's there, right? That wise mind that breaks that cycle and just reminds you, oh, yeah, most alarms are false, especially if it's with something that you get a lot of intrusive thoughts around. Anxiety doesn't necessarily equal danger. The fear will fade as you're doing that, and then the intrusive thought will pass more naturally. Yep. So we've talked about what the unwanted intrusive thoughts are, and we've been talking about our internal voices and our categories of types of intrusive thoughts and myths and challenging them. And getting started in this process of understanding, okay, we're just going to accept and not judge and let those pass. And next time we're going to actually walk through a process with you. Some
cool steps
on how to do that.
Yeah. What are some actual tools we can use?
Mm-hmm. So you can certainly start practicing now, just becoming more aware of what thoughts are passing through your mind, especially when you notice, oh, I'm starting to feel really worried or anxious or something. Okay, let's backtrack a little bit, see where we're at, and work on, oh, that's interesting, and trying to move stuff through and just let it pass without judgment and without attaching to it. But we'll give you some actual steps next time.
Yep, so please join us.
See you then. Thank you for listening to Two Therapists Talking. We look forward to sharing more conversations with you. Connect with us at twotherapisttalking.com or email podcast@twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.